Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Prabhathalovesmovies. Today, I'll be talking about some of the big flops featuring major stars from both Tollywood and also Bollywood. It is not that all these flop films have no merits. For example, Ranbir Singh's 83 was critically acclaimed and had many things going for it. But unfortunately, the third wave of COVID created a huge dent. Adding to the misery was the roar of Pushpa. Similarly, Shahid Kapoor's Jersey also received fair reviews. Just like Kabir Singh, here too the remake was helmed by the original director, but the results were completely different this time around. If we talk about the Telugu film industry, the Sai Pallavi and Rana Daggubati starrer Virata Parvam was expected to do fair business. Actually, it was a pretty good film, but the audiences didn't turn up in large numbers, particularly the masses. This, in spite of having the Naxalite backdrop and also Sai Pallavi and Rana playing important roles. If I talk about Chiranjeevi and Ramcharan's Acharya, it deserved to be the washout that it was on the account of many reasons. The unfortunate thing though is that while the Hindi flops have been discussed in great detail, now I'll be talking about some of the major flops starting from the latest ones in Tollywood. A reason that can also be attributed to these flops is the way the love stories have been written. Case in point being Prabhas's Radhe Radhakrishnan's Radhe was a film that had good potential. The story was about a world-renowned palmist, Vikramaditya. It is basically about his conflict with destiny and the love that he feels for a girl, Prerana, Pooja Hegde. The battle between astrology and science could have made for an engrossing romantic drama. The visuals by Manoj Prabhakaran were perfectly in sync with the fairy tale kind of setting. The music by Justin Prabhakaran was also quite melodious. To give credit to Prabhas, he did let go of his macho avatar and came up with a convincing performance. However, Radhesham was a failure on many accounts. To begin with, the director had no clarity on which side to take, whether that is the astrology side or the science side. The chemistry between Prabhas and Pooja Hegde was also as cold as ice, although individually they did look stunning. There were too many supporting characters which served zero purpose. The best example of this is Murli Sharma, who is generally a very reliable actor. The poor man has only got about 3 scenes in the film and there's not even a single dialogue that he utters. The final nail in the coffin was the ship scene in the pre-climax. Sure, it is well shot, but by that time you are past caring for either Prabhas or Pooja Hegde. Not surprisingly, Radhesham failed in all the languages that it released. Number 2, Acharya. The bringing of Chiranjeevi and Ramcharan in full-length roles for the first time should ideally have been a treat for the mega fans and also the neutrals. However, Acharya turned out to be a nightmare for many of the people associated, mostly Koratala Shiva, who is still paying off the debts. Much like his previous films, the director applied the technique of an outsider coming in and solving people's problems. It's a technique that paid him rich dividends in films like Mirchi and Janta Garage. However, this same technique backfired disastrously here. The major reason for that was that Acharya lacked a strong emotional core compared to the above mentioned ones. You don't at all feel anything for the sufferings that the people are undergoing. This in spite of Sonu Sood committing various atrocities in a typical villain role. Both Ramcharan and Chiranjeevi tried their level best to uplift this cliched temple drama, but their efforts didn't count to anything at the end of the day. The love story between Ramcharan and Pooja Hegde was also very loosely written. Sure, they looked good together, but there was nothing much beyond the physical appearance. Number 3, Virata Parvam. As I mentioned earlier, Virata Parvam is actually a pretty good film. Director Venu Udugula was successful in creating the Naxalite period and its impact. The art design and the costumes also added to the authenticity. Sai Pallavi as Vanilla delivered a wonderful performance in a role which is tailor-made for her. Rana Daggubati let Sai Pallavi hog the limelight while still standing his own. However, all this didn't translate in Virata Parvam getting huge numbers. A good reason for this could be the basis of love that Sai Pallavi feels for Rana Daggubati's Ravanna. Sai Pallavi's Venelas just reads a poem written by Rana and decides to go to the jungle and stay with him forever. Director Venu Udugula tries to bring a Krishna and Mirabai kind of connection, but this kind of connection is not something which is easy to buy. Today's audiences will not be able to connect to this kind of love story. Adding to the film's woes was the many unnecessary scenes in the first half. The first half is mostly filled with Vanilla searching for Ravanna, so the dramatic point in the film comes very late. Number 4. Ante Sundaraniki. Vivek Atraya's Ante Sundaraniki was a honest attempt at critiquing the orthodox practices in both Brahmins and also Christianity. The film was about how these orthodox practices stifle offsprings. This was well conveyed in some very good laugh out loud moments. The scenes between Nani and Harshvardhan in particular were a laugh riot. Naresh, as Nani's father, also delivered a terrific performance as a Brahmin traditionalist. His character comes across real and blood flesh person who is dealing with circumstances that are beyond his control. However, Ante Sundaraniki didn't completely live up to its promise. A major reason for that was the contrived screenplay or the first half. There's a lot going on in the first 40 to 50 minutes with many back and forths. As a result, it's not easy for the audiences to understand who is who. Also, the screenplay viewed around the lies told by Nani and Nazaria isn't plausible in any way. The methods taken by the leads is not something that real life couples can use if they are faced with a problem like this. Now I'll talk about some of the major Hindi flops starting from Runway 34. Runway 34, directed by Ajay Devgan and starring himself, was a far more coherent film than his previous directorial debut, Shivai. Based on a real life incident, the film was part an aviation drama and also a courtroom thriller. Ajay Devgan, the director, was very impressive in the aviation drama department. He was successful in creating the tension. You really want to know whether the passengers will come out safe or not. You cheer for Ajay Devgan's Vikram Khanna when he makes the controversial yet safe landing, and you are more eager to know about what will happen in the second half, particularly when Amitabh Bachchan comes into the picture. However, Runway 34 fails completely as a courtroom thriller. The interactions between Ajay Devgan and Amitabh Bachchan, who is opposing Devgan, lacks the thrill which is required. This is sad because both these actors have delivered many memorable performances. Amitabh Bachchan's character comes across as a paler version to the similar one that he had played in Yash Chopra's Mohabbatein. Raghulpreet Singh, who in the first half has quite an important role, is also relegated to the background. The final nail in the coffin was the hammy cameo of Boman Irani. Number 2 and 3, Bachchan Pandey and Prithviraj Samrat. Farhad Samji's Bachchan Pandey was an irritating remake to the Tamil cult classic Jigar Tanda, directed by Karthik Subbaraj. Farhad Samji took the core of Jigar Tanda and made many unnecessary deviations. Jigar Tanda was also earlier made into Telugu called Gaddalakonda Ganesh, starring Varun Tej and directed by Harish Shankar. Gaddalakonda Ganesh was also criticized for its deviations, but it's a far more respectable film than the thrash directed by Farhad Samji. Jigar Tanda is essentially about a gangster and an aspiring filmmaker. How the paths of these two meet and how it changes both their lives form the core storyline. The major difference between the Telugu remake and the Hindi one was the change of the gender concerning the aspiring director. In Bachchan Pandey, the aspiring director is a female played by Kriti Sanon. This only adds to an unnecessary romantic subplot between Akshay Kumar and her. The flashback scenes between Akshay and Jacqueline Fernandez only slow down the film. The origin story of how Bachchan Pandey becomes a gangster is also very shabbily written and directed. Samrat Prithviraj starring Akshay Kumar was a disaster from the first look itself. It is very clear that Akshay was terribly miscast in this one. The role of Samrat Prithviraj ideally should have been played by a dedicated actor because Samrat Prithviraj is a great Hindu ruler and holds a very significant place in the history of India. From the very first scene, it was very clear that Akshay treated this just as one of his many commercial projects. What added to the woes of Samrat Prithviraj was the flatly written love story between Akshay and Manushi Chillar. Manushi Chillar plays a Rajput princess, a character which was very similar to Deepika Padukone in Padmavat. There is virtually no chemistry, and the real life age gap between Akshay and Manushi only makes it difficult for the audiences to sit through. The only actor who came out of this drivel relatively unscathed was Sonu Sood. Ideally, Sonu Sood should have played the lead character. Number 4 and the last is Shimshera. Karan Malhotra's Shimshera is an attempt at making a Bahubali and an RRR kind of film. Shimshera also drew from the director's original Agnipath in a sense that Shimshera has also got a father and son sentiment, much like Agnipath. The story of Shimshera revolves around a fictional tribe. Ranbir plays a double role here, both father and son. Ranbir gave it his all to the character in both the parts. Sanjay Dutt also made for a terrific antagonist. Karan Malhotra also did a good job in bringing the landscape alive with the help of the technical team. Mithun's soundtrack also boasted of some nice songs, my favorites being Ji Huzur and the title track. Our Shimshera never became more than the sum of its parts. The major reason for that was the lack of strong emotional core. More of Shimshera should have been shown as well. Also, Vani Kapoor as Sona reminds you entirely of Katrina Kaif in Thugs of Hindustan. Although Vani Kapoor has some dramatic moments, the actress is not able to use it to her advantage. The love story between Ranbir and Vani only slows down the proceedings terribly. This is all about some of the major flops across both Tollywood and also Bollywood. There have been many more flops in the last couple of years, but I've only pertained to these 8 ones.